Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video. And friends, today I want to speak to you about a concept that has been poisoning not only Jewish dating, but even Jewish marriage from its inception. And friends, the topic I'm speaking about is the notion of Bashert, which in Yiddish literally means your destiny, or how Jews understand it to mean today as your Jewish soulmate. So, what is the notion of Bashert? It's a notion that every Jewish person has a soulmate chosen for them before they were born by the Creator himself. Someone who completes that individual. Friends, this is a concept that has individuals looking and not settling for anything that is not perfect or anything that does not meet their exact requirements. An attitude that only worsens the current shidduch crisis. And on the other hand, it has individuals prematurely giving into their sexual desires because they are convinced that they've found the one, or individuals tolerating even abuse because they have accepted that this is who Hashem wanted me to be with. And friends, don't think that this video is only for singles, because if you're in a relationship or even married, the notion of your basheret is liable to make you profoundly question whether you are with who you're supposed to be with. Now, what's really going to make this lecture controversial is not that I'm debunking the whole notion of a predestined zivug or basheret, but rather because I'm going to be trampling upon some of the words of our sages, which unfortunately, according to modern day Judaism, is as worse as trampling on the Torah itself. Chas v'shalom. And friends, the truth is that there is no such thing as the one, or any such thing as a predestined mate or basheret, no matter what anyone says, including your rabbi or even Chazal. That's right, even Chazal. You're probably thinking, dang, there goes Rabbi Asher again. And friends, don't worry, I'm going to justify my words to show you that even our greatest rabbis felt the exact same way. And being that Chazal also couldn't agree whether the notion of a bashert is true or not, I think that this is a good time to explain the authority of Chazal, also known as the judges of the Sanhedrin. And no, this does not include any other rabbi since the Sanhedrin was dismantled. And friends, you must know that I'm no Karaite, but rather, I only apply the timeless principles that seems that everyone forgot nowadays. And what's that? Well, that the words of our sages are only relevant to our theology or our hashkafa when and only when they are part of a halakha. In other words, only when it's tied to something we do halachically that helps us fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah, whether transmitted orally from Har Sinai or through the court's rulings or interpreted through the 13 principles of exegesis. This is the only time we're expected to heed the words of Chazal, the words of our sages, the words of the judges of the Sanhedrin. In other words, their authority only exists within things that we do and not things that we believe. Why? Because belief only stems from Torah Shebiktav. In other words, their personal opinions, the personal opinions of our sages, are not binding and typically disposable the vast majority of the time. And again, when I use the word sage or chazal, I'm only referring to those who sat on the Beit Din HaGadol, and not, again, your average rabbi today that really has no authority. And this isn't something I just made up. Actually, the Rambam makes this very clear in Perek Helek, as well as his son Avraham ben Rambam in his Hakdama to the Agadah. And I believe also Shmuel Nugget makes the same statement. Actually, this is the whole purpose of codifying halakha in the first place, to get rid of personal, subjective opinions out of the minds and out of the life of the average Jew. Why? Because, friends, the truth is that these opinions, these personal opinions, typically hurt more than they help. And you must also understand that every statement said by Chazal that's not attached to a halakha automatically falls into the realm of Midrash. So you're probably wondering, where do I find out what to believe and what's binding? Where are my tools? Where do we start and end from? My friends, all you need is a Chumash and a Mishnah Torah, and that's it. Anyways, not to get too far off the subject, let me bring down some sources for the whole Basheret nonsense. The Gemara on the first page of Masechet Sota states that Reish Lakish said that people are matched according to their deeds. Now, this really isn't saying much. However, Then comes Rabbi Yehuda and says 40 days before the creation of a child, Bat Kol states that the daughter of A is for B and the house of C is for D. And then in the same sugya, in the same portion of Sota, it even goes on to state that the first match mentioned is for the first marriage and the second match is for the second marriage, which really leaves you wondering, how does this justify the Bashert notion as understood today? Because here it's actually speaking about more than one Bashert. Not to mention that this portion here in the Gemara is also endorsing polygamy, which is, as you know, not the way the Bashert concept is understood today. And there is also one more place that it mentions the notion of a Bashert in the Gemara, which is in Mod Katan. However, here it basically just quotes what Rabbi Yehuda said in Masechet Sota. And that's it. And friends, this is where Jews decide to build a whole doctrine from out of an obscure midrashic statement, which if you look into it was only the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda quoting Rav Shmuel. And from this the rabbis begin to build from Nachmanides to even the Zohar. For example, Nachmanides, also known as the Ramban, a post-Talmudic figure, explains in Emunah U'Bitachon that before a child is born, God takes its soul and separates it into two halves, placing one half in the male and one half in the female. Just remember this, because we're going to get to it later again. And when these two halves meet again in matrimony, their original connection and love bond returns. Where do they get this? I don't know. I mean, honestly, do we no longer require Torah sources for what we believe anymore? And the Zohar pretty much repeats the words of Nachmanides. The Zohar states that before birth, all figures of souls that are to be born stand before God, mated in pairs. And afterwards, when they come into the world, God makes the match on earth. And no, I don't believe the Zohar predates Nachmanides, by the way. And you're probably thinking, okay, you have Asher's opinion versus Chazal, the Zohar, and Nachmanides. And of course, other later rabbis. What do we do? Well, friends, you must know that I'm not alone here. Rav Sadia Gaon, the Rasag, states in Emunot V'Deot regarding the concept of Bashert, which was also floating around in his time. He writes, the mystics attribute the workings of this dominant passion to the influence of the stars. Thus, they assert that if two human beings were born under two stars that face each other or under the appropriate zodiac signs, they will fall in love and be attracted to one another. And friends, everyone who knows basic Jewish Kabbalah knows that this is what they teach. Anyways, he goes on to refute the Zohar and Nachmanides by stating, in fact, they carry this theory still further, attributing consuming passions to the work of the Creator. Magnified and exalted be He, they maintain namely that God has created the spirits of His creatures in the form of round spheres, which He then divided into two halves, one half being put into a different person. Therefore, when that soul finds that part completing it, it becomes irresistibly drawn to it. From this point, they proceed further yet, making it a duty for man to surrender himself to his passions. And then he goes on to state, him, again, not me, that the advocates of all this mentioned above are really thoughtless and without intelligence. Rav Sadia Gaon. How about the Rambam? Well, the Rambam writes in a famous tshuva regarding what the Almighty truly controls in this world. He states that it is only the kohot hateva, the natural forces such as wind and the rain, that are under the domain of God's control in this world. And one's choice of a spouse and other such worldly decisions lie fully in the purview and control of man. The Rambam, my friends, he goes further to teach regarding the famous statement said by Chazal that when they say that Hakol b'yidei shamayim chutz meyirat shamayim, that everything is in God's hands besides the fear of heaven, he says that it means that fear of heaven reflects all human choices. Therefore, all human choice and endeavors are firmly in man's control. And if not understood in this manner, it would be a clear contradiction of free will. And he also mentions this same concept in Shmona Prakim. This is the Rambam, my friends. And friends, the reason this topic is so important is because today we have a world suffering solely because Judaism and Jews cannot get their act together, due mainly because of so much nonsense that has been spoon-fed to them over the last 1,000 years by rabbis who felt that they knew better. How? Because by Torah being misinterpreted and replaced by midrashim, halachot have lost their meaning. And this is the main reason that Jews and Judaism have become so socially, ethically irrelevant in the world that we live in today. And this is why I'm giving this mini lecture, because friends, one aspect of Jewish life that suffers greatly due to this notion of Bashert is relationships and ultimately Jewish marriages. How by creating ingrates that walk around thinking that because they were born from X, they deserve Y. That no matter what they do or how they behave, Hashem has prepared someone for them. Nonsense. And for those Jews who have put off getting married because they're waiting for the perfect soulmate, I'm here to tell you that there's no such thing as the perfect soulmate. A relationship, my friend, is only as valuable as what you and your spouse put into it. And that you can find everything you're dreaming about in the average individual as long as you both fear and love Hashem and are determined to truly care for one another. And my friends, I would also have to mention that this is not something typically found among secular people or people who do not keep mitzvot. So if you're hearing me today and you also want to get for yourself a caring mitzvah-keeping spouse, I want to encourage you to consider Torah Judaism. For more information about everything Jewish, please visit torahjudaism.org. Thank you.